So play that out really quick. If the first time buyer is then they're super excited because there's bonus bathroom in the basement that's just been renovated.
I love the word bonus.
I got my man cave. I got the extra space. I want this deal to go through. We're in attorney review, and then we eventually pull up the Oprah request and see that that bathroom wasn't permitted. What's the ramifications for the buyer if it wasn't caught?
So, say the township ever comes out to do an inspection. They will likely require that the buyer then take out the permits and do it properly. I don't know how much that could cost, but I know it's a headache.
Of course.
If they go to sell and they do have somebody diligent purchasing and they find this out, they're going to have to do it anyways.
They're inheriting that problem. And if it wasn't done properly, then they're going to have to not only put the money to fix it, but then also go through that. And townships are not quick.
Worst case scenario, the township's like, take it all out.
Welcome back to the Central Jersey Real Estate Podcast. Today we have a tremendously tactical and inspirational episode because my guest specializes in one thing all clients want most, a smooth and stress-free real estate transaction. I'm Joe Valenti, realtor with Remax InStyle, and I help Central Jersey home buyers and sellers in Middlesex, Mercer, and Somerset counties prepare for the biggest financial transaction of their lives by talking to experts who can save them time, money, and heartache. When it comes to a smooth and stress-free real estate transaction, nobody does it better than Ruma Mazumdar, the real estate attorney powerhouse and owner of Key Esquire Law Office. With her help, we're going to cut through the legal jargon, distill documentation, and narrow down the most important questions that you need to know when you're buying or selling in Central Jersey. So Ruma, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on today.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here.
So before we get into our questions, why don't you give us like a quick 30-second intro of who you are?
Okay, so I'm Ruma. I'm a real estate attorney. I started my own practice about 3 years ago. And before that, I was in the corporate world in New York City doing litigation. I'd always been in the real estate realm. I grew up in a real estate family. So even though I ran away from it, it still kept chasing me.
Gotcha.
And then I finally took the full jump right into it and was like, I might as well just listen to the path I'm supposed to be on and walk it.
It kept pulling you in.
Yeah.
Awesome. So in preparing for the interview, I was kind of blown away by a lot of the reviews that you get from your clients, which I'm pretty jealous of, because they all echoed the same theme over and over. And some of the words that came up many times were breezy, simple, answers with a smile, comfortable, stress-free, smooth, and my favorite, she never made me feel like I was bothering her. I know people come to you for your real estate law expertise, but are you surprised at what they mention and how comfortable that you've been able to make them feel?
Yes and no. I mean, no, because, so like I said, I come from a corporate background, and the one thing I feel like I hated was just how corporate it is, right? People hire attorneys usually at like the most vulnerable times in their lives, when they're super stressed out, when something traumatic happened to them, right? It's like it's not a good call when you're making a call to an attorney.
Right.
In what we do, obviously, it's an exciting time, but it's a super stressful time. And the one thing that I hated in the corporate world was all of like the complicated legalese people would use in order to just like tell them what, they were going to do for them. Okay. And this person, like, whether sitting across from me or on the phone, I'm listening to them and they just like don't understand like what the attorney is saying. So when I started my practice, I wanted to make sure that I was like leveling with the human.
Okay.
And able to communicate with them and not be so like, I'm the attorney and I'm going to use these complicated words. I really just wanted them to know that they're in good hands. You can trust me. And this is going to be a good thing. Like, right. This is like a good call that you made, not like a traumatic experience.
Yeah, you make it more like we're partners in this, we're going to do it together versus a vertical relationship. I know everything and you're just going to do what I say type of thing.
Exactly.
Which is definitely great. Now, as a woman-owned and minority-owned law office, you said that your one mission is to support women and minority clients in their real estate needs. Can you talk more about how you do that?
Yeah, so obviously when people see someone that looks like them, they're happier to work with them, So I think, one, that's what my firm has created. I've had clients who literally will Google minority-owned law firm. A lot of women will reach out because they're like, oh, I want to work with a woman,
Okay.
And the other thing is like, my parents are immigrant parents, and that was a huge struggle. And a lot of communities that are underserved, like, just don't see home ownership as like a dream that they can achieve and attain and whatnot.
Okay.
And so, I felt like that was a great message to also put out there and work with communities like that as well.
Awesome. Would you say like 50% or more of your clients are then more minority, or?
It's super diverse, actually. I mean, yeah, at least 50%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you're really helping pave the path for a lot of people that otherwise didn't think it was possible.
Well, I'm trying, at least,
So you work with a lot of first-time home buyers. What are some of the common misconceptions that they come to you with about working with a real estate attorney?
So a lot of times people will call me and just say, like, I didn't know I need an attorney. I'm just calling you because my agent told me to. And so here I am. And I was like, okay, great. Like, let's start with the basics. Some people will think my job is only attorney review because that's like what it's referred to in New Jersey. But that's like only where my job begins, Once I get the contract, I explain to them I'm going to be involved now all the way to closing, like everything that happens in between. We're going to look at the contract. We're going to review the contract with you. We're going to negotiate anything else that we need to during the attorney review period. We're going to help you with the inspections. If you're getting financing, we're going to help you with the appraisal if anything happens. Your lender is going to be communicating with my office. We do title clearance. That is done from my office. And ultimately, the closing only happens because my office is the one that's going to confirm that and communicate it to you and let you know, what do you need to do on the closing day? What do you need to bring to the table? So, yeah.
And I like that when I'm working with you, a lot of my clients are very well prepped. So when I'm giving I try to give as much information as I can, but it's almost like reiterating information sometimes you've already heard when working with you, because you're pretty on top of step by step throughout the transaction.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think you explain it in milestones too, and I do as well. And then they kind of are like hearing it from both ends. They're like, okay, great. And I'm like, we're a team here, I'm not just doing the legal work.
Yeah, exactly. Which we all have a common goal of trying to get them to close. I have to ask this because the number 2 question on Google is, how much does a real estate attorney charge?
Not enough.
Fair. I can understand that. But can you give us a feel for what a buyer or seller can expect when working with you?
Yeah, I would say typical fees, and most attorneys, they charge flat fees, especially in the residential context.
Okay.
The flat fee it helps with, transparency, estimating your costs, knowing, what services you're going to have. So I work in a flat fee arrangement as well. And I would say like reasonable fees start in about like the $1,500-$1,600 range, which is around where I am, and then go up from there.
Okay.
I feel like any lower, you start to lose a little bit of that boutique, attention that attorneys can provide. But there is a race to the bottom, unfortunately, when it comes to
all industries have them.
Yeah. And, I often Google to see what people are charging in New Jersey. And there's closing attorneys out there that are like $4.95 for a closing attorney. But then I've heard on the back end, on the day of closing, they charge all these additional fees that the buyer or seller had no idea about.
Like a bait and switch type of thing.
Yeah.
Just get the client and then charge them on the back end. But
yeah.
So it's fair to say that you kind of get what you pay for when it comes to attorneys.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of things, like especially when the pandemic happened and obviously the whole real estate boom happened, a lot of attorneys also just added on real estate as like a part of their practice.
Gotcha.
And I'm not knocking them or anything like that, but you can tell the difference between someone who's like a generalist and like a jack of all trades and will do like a divorce, a DUI and a ticket, and then all of a sudden they're doing a residential closing. Like you can feel that versus a firm that specializes in it like mine and knows like pretty much any scenario you're probably going to get into. I mean, I do get surprised here and there.
Of course.
But over the 600, 700 transactions I've done in 3 years, like I've pretty much seen it all.
So would you say there's like a difference of Well, let's try to unpack that a little bit. So, what are some of the things you would see with an attorney that is that jack of all trades? Is it lack of communication? Is it lack of understanding how like tank sweeps work when you're negotiating if there's an underground oil tank, something like that?
Yeah, so I would definitely say responsiveness and like availability, right? So someone who's also practicing in court, for example,
Okay.
they're beholden to the court, 9 to 4 schedule or whatever that is. The thing with real estate is, as you know, as soon as an offer gets accepted, you want to start attorney review right away.
Right.
So if your attorney that you hired is in court, they're not really prioritizing the
Right.
fact that you just had your offer accepted
True.
because they're in court on a completely different matter. And in that case, they may not get back to you for an extra 24 hours, 48 hours, who knows? Maybe they're in trial and they just have no bandwidth, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. And then of course this like specialization, right? Being able to advise, like you said, oil tanks, also knowing in what regions and why you need to do like a radon inspection. In what regions can you expect like a well test? And what does it mean to have a well on the property? Right?
Right.
All of these like little nuances that come up with different areas in New Jersey, different counties in New Jersey. So all of that specialized knowledge takes time to acquire. And if you just like add it on or you're like, yeah, I'll just do a closing here and there, like you're just not providing the same level of expertise that your client deserves.
True. Now, I've worked with you on a couple of deals kind of throughout the state, and we know that South Jersey just does not like attorneys for some reason, but we've done a couple transactions in South Jersey.
First time home buyers because they're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where would you say that you specialize in New Jersey?
Probably heavily like Middlesex County, Central Jersey. I also have a concentration in Hudson County because I used to live out there.
Okay.
But honestly, it's like what I specialize in truly is first time home buyers.
Okay. Regardless of where they are.
Regardless of where they are.
You make it work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Your Instagram account, Key Esquire, is a wealth of information. I like the way in each of the videos you kind of break down a lot of the jargon to be more digestible and much easier for the viewer and eventually the first-time home buyer looking for it. You've detailed hidden surprises like buried oil tanks and unwarrantable condo communities. What other surprises should first-time buyers be aware of?
I think a big one is any sort of additions or renovations or things that have been done to the property.
Okay.
So when my office represents a buyer, for example, we file an OPRA report or an OPRA request, which is the Open Public Records Act. And you file that with the township, and that lets you see the history of the home, like all of the permits that were pulled for anything that was done at the property, and also if there's any violations on the property. So, a lot of times there'll be a listing that'll say brand new finished basement. And that's like a huge thing that always needs a permit, right?
Sure, yeah.
But there's certain townships that also don't require what's called a certificate of occupancy. And in those townships, sometimes the seller will just put in that basement and not take the permits out.
Gotcha.
Because they don't need to, right? They need to, but they're not going to need to in order to like sell the home. Like it might not come up if you don't hire someone who does this all the time and will actually look for that. So that is like a huge thing that buyers should pay attention to, right? Like if you see any sort of work done, if you see an extra bathroom, because we look at the tax card too to see, how many bathrooms, how many bedrooms, and then that's how we figure out what was added. Were there permits, regardless of, whether there's going to be a township inspection to get the CO in order to close.
So play that out really quick. If the first time buyer is then they're super excited because there's bonus bathroom in the basement that's just been renovated.
I love the word bonus.
I got my man cave. I got the extra space. I want this deal to go through. We're in attorney review, and then we eventually pull up the OPRA request and see that that bathroom wasn't permitted. What's the ramifications for the buyer if it wasn't caught? What would be the issue for that?
So, say the township ever comes out to do an inspection, they will likely require that the buyer then take out the permits and do it properly. I don't know how much that could cost, but I know it's a headache.
Of course.
If they go to sell and they do have somebody diligent purchasing and they find this out, they're going to have to do it anyway.
They're inheriting that problem. And if it wasn't done properly, then they're going to have to not only put the money to fix it, but then also go through and townships are not quick.
Worst case scenario, the township's like, take it all out.
Really? Okay. So they have the power, just like this doesn't conform to whatever rules that they have, and you suddenly lost your bonus bathroom or bonus space that you thought was a great thing to fly.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing sometimes too, I know I've seen different counties also add the requirement for a certificate of occupancy, which then, sometimes like whatever your home was like might get retroactively like grandfathered in.
Okay.
But not always, in which case then it becomes your problem.
Yeah, and a big problem at that. You attend clients with your closings as needed. Can you describe one of the stranger things or unusual closings that you've had?
So I haven't been to a closing in a really long time.
Fair, okay.
But that's because through all of these crazy experiences, I've learned that the best place to have a closing is at the title company's office.
True, okay.
And that's because they're the ones that are the ones preparing the documents, right? So if the lender requires a last minute change, if they need another addendum, the title company is the best place to have it because they can quickly communicate with the lender, get the documents they need, and have, our people sign at the table. As the attorney, I like having it at the title company's office because that allows me then to do my job, which is deal with any sort of walkthrough issues that come up on the closing day, put together any last minute agreements that come up, on closing day, an escrow agreement, a credit negotiation, right? So my attention is not like, are you signing the papers correctly? Like it's, let's resolve this problem and then get you to the closing table.
Gotcha.
Crazy closings I've seen is like, I've had a client who's just like, the math is not mathing. Like they just didn't want to believe like what was on the closing disclosure. Okay. And I was like, I don't know how else to explain this. Like I whipped out my calculator and then we hand wrote everything and he just like wouldn't, like he just wouldn't accept it. And then I was just like, I don't know.
Do you want this house or not?
I was like, I'm going to leave the room and I'm just going to give you like 15 minutes to maybe like do your own math.
Gotcha.
And let's see how it goes. But it's just like,
hopefully that's few and far between. It's not something that you
that's only happened like once or twice before. Okay. And like, I hate math. Like that's why I went to law school. So the fact that I had to like pull out my calculator, go through the credits and debits, I was like, oh my God, this is insane.
And on the, you have no way of backing out at that point.
Right? Exactly.
Like you have to just kind of take it for what it is.
Yeah.
Because you're too late. So when push comes to shove, you often need an advocate that supports you, but can still find a way to push through. What are some of the common pain points between buyers and sellers that they argue over?
Oh, okay. I would say the biggest point of contention in a transaction is always home inspections, right? The seller thinks they put the best property ever on the market. There's nothing wrong with it. And the buyer is like, I'm spending a whole bunch of money. I want this to be perfect. Right? So it's like, what is that middle ground? Mm-hmm. So I would say that is probably the biggest place. And how we typically handle it is, one, there's an aspect of just making the client feel heard, right? Okay. Like, we get it. You're spending a whole bunch of money. These are all the problems. And you feel like it might be unsafe. You're not sure if you want to deal with all of the fixes afterwards, but like, let's figure out what's the most important, right? So the inspector most of the time will do a good job of like giving us a summary list. So that's a great place to work from most of the time. And then our clients will be like, I want everything on the summary list, and so that could be 15 items, that could be 5 items, who knows? So we have the buyer kind of really think through, what is the most important to them. And I also tell them like during my consults in the way beginning, I'm like, listen, you're buying a property that is existing. Someone's lived in it. It's going to be lived in, right? And if you want a perfect home, then you should build it and you should go towards new construction.
And even then, it's not always perfect. Sometimes it's still issues.
Exactly. So I kind of level set them in the beginning, which then helps with the conversation during inspections. Okay. Of like, hey, we have to be reasonable here. And let's think about the big ticket items, the things that'll cost you a lot of money to do on your own afterwards, right? Okay. So that's how we kind of like pull them in. And then on the seller side, like I said, they're like, this is the most perfect home. I've lived in it for 20 years. They feel very like attached to it. They're like, why would they want to change that, Yeah. But with the sellers, I always level set and say, hey, listen, like you're obviously selling this home the way that it is, but it needs to be a safe place. A new family's going to move in here. You want them to feel the same way that you do, of course, about the home, right? So I feel like it's all always just like emotions and appealing to people's emotions rather than it is like
You didn't know when you got into this field, both even as an agent, it's like you're half of the job is just battling people's emotions and understanding whether they do or they don't want something. And what if they want to back out, then we'll get them out of the deal. But if they want, if you know they want into the deal, we just try to say like these are problems that they can really take care of after.
And the biggest thing that helps me, especially with negotiations, and like I can be a bulldog if I need to. Like I used to litigate in New York City courts. Like I know how to bring that out. But that's not the arena. This is not the arena to do it, right? So, what I think is important is also knowing people's motivations, right? So if I have a buyer and I know the seller keeps pushing back, they don't want to do anything, I kind of ask them like, okay, what's the seller's position? Like, are they relocating? Do they, is this an estate sale where they just want to get it off their hands? It's like, someone's parent passed away. Like what is the scenario that is causing them to like push back, right? Because that really helps. And then it's like, what's the buyer going through? Well, their lease is going to be up soon. Why are they so antsy? You know what I mean? So it's like all of these little things also help inform why people are acting the way that they're acting too.
Okay.
And then the next thing I would say is just like, if the attorney is litigious and like argumentative, it's like not helpful, which at that point I just pick up the phone and call and I'm like, don't we both want to get paid? Like, why trying to kill the deal?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a new segment that we're doing. It's called Rapid Fire Learning.
Oh boy.
I want the audience to learn a little bit more about you. I'm going to start giving you just a word or a phrase, and I want you to describe one thing that it taught you.
Okay.
Cool?
Okay.
Your first job.
Oh, my first job was folding jeans at Abercrombie.
What did that teach you about real estate?
Oh, God. No, that taught me how to like fold my jeans.
What about first career job? Like you mentioned you were in New York.
Yeah. So let's see. I would say my corporate background really informed a lot of the things that I do differently in my current firm.
Okay.
But it was a really strong backbone of just like learning professionalism, specialization, research, writing, how to communicate in writing, all of that, like big challenges, how to break down big challenges into smaller pieces to like, seeing things as a puzzle rather than a problem.
Sure. I like that.
Feeling like, arguing in the gray, right? Making, someone could be like, your client could be totally wrong, but the fun part is like putting in like motion papers that argue that they're totally correct based on the case law out there and the way that you spin it, right? Which is like such a skill.
Which helps when you're trying to advocate for your client who may or may not
be wrong and unreasonable. But then you're like, no, I have an argument for you.
Gotcha. So good to have you on your side and not go against you.
Yeah.
The second, growing up with your grandparents in India.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So that was interesting. I was born here, and then my parents, very humble beginnings, couldn't afford me, so they thought the best thing to do was to just send me to live with my grandparents for a little bit in India, where they were like established and, had the time to take care of me. Like my parents were working full-time, multiple jobs, figuring things out here. I don't remember too much of it, but I know I did schooling there. I learned how to speak Gujarati. I learned how to speak Bengali while I was there. And yeah.
Okay.
I forgot it all once I got back, and now I understand a little bit of it. But it's also like, because I learned like the native language, my clients are able to talk to me in the native language because I still understand it.
Nice. Okay.
And then we kind of work through like broken English and like broken like Gujarati or Bengali to like get to, the end of the transaction.
And there's a little comfort that you can then develop with the client almost instantly.
Yeah.
Just by having that commonality.
Yeah. What
about your badass entrepreneur mom?
Oh, my mother. I am my mother. It's crazy. Yeah, she was like my biggest inspiration and support in actually taking the leap, leaving corporate and starting my practice. Yeah, and she was like an OG in like the mortgage world as like a woman.
Gotcha.
starting her own brokerage. So, all of those themes you can see kind of carrying through.
Absolutely. She pioneered her own business, and then
Yeah, because that like 25 years ago, I want to say, right? Like, and it was before the whole crash in '08. Like in 2001, I want to say my mom started the brokerage. So
very cool.
it was still very male dominated. And here we have this like 5 foot, she's shorter than me. She's like 5'3" woman. Like, this is my brokerage.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And that's where you get the fire from.
Yeah. Because she
Very
was
cool.
telling me, she was like, and I'm sure you can empathize with it, but the splits that like your boss takes because of like the commissions that you make, she was like, I'm tired of this. Like, I'm a top producer. I'm barely getting like what I'm earning. I'm out. I can go make more money on my own.
So she did, and then eventually you did, getting out of New York and starting your own firm. What about COVID?
What about COVID? What did I learn through that? Let's see. A lot of resilience there.
Okay. So give us a timetable. Like, when did you start your firm, and then when did COVID hit?
Okay, so I was still in private practice when I was working in the city, in New York City, March 2020. Okay. And I didn't start my practice until December 2021. So you could say it was like towards, back when things were opening up.
Okay.
Yeah. So interestingly, though, I was able to build my practice in a very remote sense because everyone was already trained from the way transactions worked during COVID. Gotcha. To just expect that everything was going to be remote. Okay. Because my biggest thing was like, I don't want to have in-person meetings. I don't want to be traveling a whole bunch. Like, I love working from home. And then once we could travel, now the way I'd set up my practice to be super remote and function regardless of where I am in the world was like a huge thing that I learned, that kind of like worked out well.
Wait, so you started your practice in real estate practice in 21. I got licensed in 22. I was only licensed a few months before I was introduced to you from Alex. It seemed like you were like in business for many, many years. Like you hit the ground running really quick.
Yeah.
Was it a big jump going from law or New York litigation to real estate law?
Oh yeah. I was like, I had this like small little, and thankfully, so like Carl Hansen, he's like local here in this community. He's going to be retiring soon, or so he says. But he kind of took me under his wing, let me like work out of a conference room in his office while I was doing these closings. And that might be why it felt like I'd been doing it for years, because I was like working with an attorney who'd been doing it for decades.
Gotcha.
So he really was just like, he really bought into me from like day one, and having his support is like why I was able to just like portray that I like really knew what I was doing really quickly. And it also helped that I have family in real estate. Mm-hmm. So they gave me the runway to kind of experiment building out my process with their clients.
Sure.
Because they were just like, they were all like, Bisha's daughter, like basically that's my dad.
Okay.
They'd be like, oh, I want to work with Bisha's daughter. We love your family. Like, we want to work with all of you. So they gave me a lot of grace to falter through, some of the stuff that I was doing.
Okay.
And then when I hit my stride and I officially launched my website, like I would say I started my practicing in August of 2021, but I didn't tell the world I was doing it until December 2021. So like in those like 4 months, I was like figuring out who is Ruma as a real estate attorney, as a business owner, and how to talk to clients, like how to just talk to people, because I represented corporations before.
Right.
So it was like a totally different world.
Gotcha. And you feel like you're more comfortable and you enjoy helping people versus helping corporations?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Last on the rapid fire learning is Churro.
Churro, my puppy. Oh my God. We don't deserve dogs. Like seriously. He's taught me like unconditional love, like what that really means. Yeah.
Okay. What kind of dog is he?
He's a Cavapoo. So he's a King Cavalier and Mini Poodle mix.
Okay.
He's going to be 5 soon. And he was my COVID puppy. Like I got him in April of 2020.
Gotcha.
And I'm attached to him as much as he's attached to me.
I see on the stories that you have like the snuggle time in the...
Yeah. He sleeps in my bed. He's allowed on furniture. We go on road trips. He enjoys hiking.
He's your son in all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So going back into your your New York days. You went to law school at NYU to work in DC. back to law school in New York, working at two major firms in the city where you practice state and federal courts, and now own your own business with an incredible amount of success. It's been over 600 or 700 transactions.
Yeah, like between there.
Something in there. What
and counting.
What can you attribute your success to?
Maybe some of my perfectionism.
Okay.
I would say, no, I didn't know it, but I enjoy doing business development. Like I enjoy talking to people, and real estate itself, I feel like is second nature to me because I grew up around it. You know, it's like what my parents always talked about. And especially when I say like first time home buyers, like I feel like that's all I like grew up hearing stories about because my parents were doing the loans for first time home buyers.
Gotcha.
You know, so it all of this like knowledge osmosis that like I didn't even know existed kind of like unlocked when I started my own practice.
Okay.
So it felt like just very natural. And I think that learning about the emotional side of these transactions and not being afraid of that and adding it to my practice has also helped, you know, and the team that I've built. Like I have very empathetic people on my team, and my clients love it, you know, like everyone's like an extension of me, and they're not always going to get me, but they're very happy dealing with anyone on my team. Okay. They're like, I feel heard all the time. All my questions are answered. We always get a response back. We don't feel like, you know, we're bothering you. All those things, like you said in the beginning,
yeah.
Right? I think like it translates. And then I think that's what it is, you know, like I really enjoy this. And I think that's part of it too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You don't feel bothered by, you know, have to wake up in the morning, have to go to work. It's more something that you want to do, especially with being your own boss. I'm sure that the sense of independence and the entrepreneurial spirit definitely helps make a difference.
I mean, it's definitely a balance, right? Because sometimes it can be, and that's the other thing with like real estate attorneys, like we're doing like 600-700 transactions in 3 years. Like imagine how many people I've talked to.
Right. Exactly.
That is taxing on you. But that's also like the only way that we can make money, be successful. I have a team to pay, right? But I feel like sometimes like people forget how many like transactions and people we're dealing with at the same time. But because of that, I'm like, you have to put a system in place in order to handle that. And I've always been very diligent about what is the system, what is the protocol. So we try to fit everything into like a reference point, right? Like, oh, we did this on this file, so we record it. And then, oh, we learned this from this file. Let's incorporate it into our process. And like everyone learns this Key Esquire process that we call like in the firm, right? So it feels like we're moving like a machine.
Awesome. And doing very well at it. So you've mentioned conversations at the dinner table with your parents. What were those like?
Ooh, contentious? No. It was always about work, which, you know, I would get annoyed as a child because I'd be like, can we just not talk about work? Like, let's just watch TV, you know? But it's funny because in those conversations, I learned what fun my parents had was like helping people that may have not had a great credit score or were just saving up, or working with people who were super excited about buying their first home, right? So it was like them talking through how they packaged their loan, how they got them certain rates, and all of this like stuff that at that point I didn't understand. But now that I'm like in it and working with these types of clients, and I also work with my parents' office too, you know, like it all just like makes sense. It's like, we lock them in at this rate because like that's just like how the market works, you know, or they didn't have a great credit score. So we told them to go do X, X, and X, you know, and then come back in 6 months. Okay. Right. So like all these things that are nuances to lending and financing and things like that. But also, like I said, speak to like the emotions of the actual first time home buyer. Okay. And that's why I feel like it's such like a specialty for me. Like I would go as far as to say I'm like probably one of the best attorneys in New Jersey to send a first time home buyer to.
Sure. So if someone is listening today and they belong to an underserved community and they think that owning a home is in their reach, what advice would you have for them?
So I would say, you know, reach out to people that are in real estate, right? Starting with talking to a realtor, having conversations, you know, talk to people who maybe own a home, right? Like you must know people that own homes, right? There's that. One of the biggest thing is, of course, reaching out to a mortgage person, a lender and asking them like, hey, I want to buy a home. What do I need to do? How do I prepare for that? The other thing you can also do is like, there's so many assistance programs out there too, right, through grants, state grants and things like that. See if you like qualify for those, right? So homeownership is not out of reach. There's so many resources to get there. It's about just like reading up on it, talking to the right people, and figuring out what your path is. And say you don't even have anything saved, then it's like open a separate bank account and be like, this is going to be my home ownership. Right. And just put money into that every single month, whatever you can, right? So at least you're thinking about it.
Okay. And then eventually just keep asking questions, keep working towards it, and reach out to a great attorney to be able to help you get there.
Yep, exactly.
So lastly, how can people reach out to you? How can they find you, learn more about you?
So keysquire.com is our website. I'm on social at Key Esquire on Instagram, on TikTok, we're on Facebook, and you can just call in.
Awesome.
And check out our Google reviews.
There's plenty of those to go around. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was great.